Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7 here on Broadcasting Scotland. My name's Kenny McBride and I'm joined tonight by two fabulous guests. Firstly, from the Save Loch Lomond campaign, Sam Payton. Sam, how are you doing this evening?
Yeah, I'm okay after an eventful day.
Yeah, well, we will talk about that shortly. And on the other side, we have Ken MacDonald from the iScot magazine. Ken, how are you doing?
I'm great, thank you.
Great. And we do apologise. We had a wee delay getting started today with some gremlin got into our YouTube connection, and unfortunately the programme wasn't being broadcast when we thought it was. So we do apologise for that, but we crack on straight away with our coronavirus statistics update. And as of 2 p.m. today, a total of 329,962 people in Scotland have been tested through NHS Scotland labs and UK government regional testing centres. Of these, 311,478 were confirmed negative, 18,484 were positive. Today there are 10 new confirmed cases of COVID-19 in Scotland, but there have been no new reported deaths of people who have tested positive today. This will of course be an underestimate of the number of cases, as not everyone with the virus will necessarily display symptoms, and not everyone who has symptoms will necessarily get themselves tested. Although again, as we always do, we urge you, if you're showing any symptoms, please do book a test as quickly as possible. We will be talking to Sam about that in just a moment. Of the people who have tested positive, 295 were in hospital last night, 3 of whom were in intensive care. And due to a change in the way that the Scottish Government is reporting these statistics now, there's no longer a report of the number of suspected cases in intensive care. The number of patients in Scotland who have died from complications caused by the coronavirus infection remains at 2,491. This number only includes those who have died in hospital having received a positive test for the virus. And the latest UK daily figures available show that 45,501 patients who tested positive for COVID-19 have sadly died from their illness, an increase of 79. This number refers to deaths in all settings, not just those in hospitals. And as it's Wednesday, we have the National Records of Scotland report. And as at the 19th of July, 4,193 deaths have been registered in Scotland where the novel coronavirus was mentioned on the death certificate, according to statistics published by National Records of Scotland today. Between the 13th and 19th of July, 6 deaths were registered that mentioned COVID-19 on the death certificate, representing the 12th weekly reduction in a row and the lowest weekly total since the pandemic began. Deaths involving COVID-19 accounted for less than 1% of all deaths registered from the 13th to the 19th of July, showing a significant decline from the peak in week 17, which was the 20th to the 26th of April, when COVID-19 deaths accounted for 36% of all deaths. And before we get on to the rest of the news, I would just remind you, if you want to join the conversation, you can do that on Twitter. Follow us, first of all, at Broadcast Scot, and then join the conversation using hashtag Scotland at 7. That's hashtag Scotland AT and the number 7. We will be flashing some of those texts up there, as you can see on the screen throughout the show. But speaking of tests, Sam, I understand you went for a test today. How did that go?
Yeah, I did go for a test. I woke up this morning with a split and sore head, coughing and sinuses. Feeling as if they're on fire. So after a quick conversation with my GP receptionist and Linda at the programme, as the producer as well, I decided it would be wiser to book a test, and basically then I would know within 48 hours whether it was just a cold or COVID. So me and the wee fella booked in. It was hilarious trying to get booked in on the system, and when it asked you your occupation, because it didn't recognise my occupation. So anyway, we got there, booked in for the test, went to Glasgow Airport. The signposts were a bit confusing, but we found it. And for those that have already been to Glasgow Airport, will know this, but for those that haven't, it is, sorry, my apologies. Basically, it's quite daunting because all it is people standing there with face masks on, and the first person you see has got a big placard saying do not open your car windows. So it is a wee bit like one of those kind of end of days apocalypse movies. You're not allowed to open your window. Everything's said to you through a closed window, which was quite difficult. And you go through various checkpoints. And at the end up, you have to go into a self-testing bay. But you get given a pack. Now I had the wee fella with me. He had to get tested as well. And what they give you is a wee instruction manual, which basically has step-by-step instructions on how to do the test. We were having a giggle because when we opened it up, you've got a tissue and things. And then as you kind of start reading through it, you realise why you've got the tissue. You've got to blow your nose before you start the test. And the reason being is the swab goes down into the back of your tonsils, and then the same swab goes up your nose. The wee fella, done him first, he was a wee star, he allowed me to do it. Made a bit of a joke and things about it. Sorry again. And yeah, we done it. It's you don't really see people. As I say, it's a bit like an apocalypse movie scene, and you're going from checkpoint to checkpoint to checkpoint. Everybody's very friendly as they can be through the car, and you get thumbs up and things like that, all done by placard signs. And then at the end, you hand the test back, and when you're getting the test, you're allowed to open your window about 2 inches and squeeze it through. So we've got up to 48 hours to wait for the result, and it's very much, even though it's not nice, and afterwards you feel as if, you've had something poking up your nose, and it's a horrible feeling. And even afterwards, even driving home, you could still have that feeling. But it's worth getting it done. I would rather go through that and find out I'm negative and I've just got a nasty cold than self-isolating and having the questions, because it's not that if it turns out to be COVID. So it's worth doing the test. It's not pleasant, but it's over and done with before you know it. The whole process from start to finish with all the checkpoints and everything, sorry, my apologies, took about 20 to 25 minutes. And you can actually arrange to get the tests sent to the house, but I thought I would rather have it done quicker, self-isolate until we get the results, and then we can take it from there. So yeah, definitely, if anybody has got any symptoms at all, it's definitely, I would urge them to go and get the test done.
For doing the right thing, and we obviously we hope you're feeling better very soon. But we go on to the news just now, and public health teams in Lanarkshire are continuing to investigate a cluster of confirmed cases of coronavirus associated with a Sittle call handling facility in Bells Hill. As of today, 15 positive cases have been identified among staff at the facility, and 5 cases amongst close contacts. All Sittle staff have been advised to isolate for 14 days and take a COVID-19 test. A total of 393 test results from staff have been reported so far. The investigation has identified a number of secondary locations with links to the call centre. NHS Lanarkshire's public health team and North Lanarkshire Council are working with all affected premises to ensure appropriate cleaning and safety measures are taken forward, as well as identifying any close contacts in line with Test and Protect guidelines. Those additional locations are Owen's Bar in Coatbridge, the Railway Tavern in Motherwell, Costa at the Bell Quadrant in Carfin, the End Clothing Store in Glasgow, and Merlin's Bar in Motherwell. With the exception of identified close contacts, people who have attended those locations are not being asked to isolate, but to be vigilant about symptoms, and if they have any symptoms, to immediately self-isolate and book a test. So Ken, I'll come to you first on this. This outbreak, we know it was associated with this call centre being run by for Public Health England. And it does seem that there were concerns about how the place had been set up, that there hadn't been a proper risk assessment done, that people weren't necessarily able to distance themselves properly. How big a concern do you think it is that we're having incidents like this in call centres?
Well, by the very nature, call centres usually have people sitting very close to each other on headsets. But it seems to be that they've narrowed it down to a gentleman who was working for an office downstairs, car sharing, which is even closer proximity. And it just goes to show you how dangerous this virus is. It needs to be treated with respect. I know that people are getting fed up, thinking that lockdown has been imposed on them for a specific reason of the government being nasty, but it's a very real and dangerous disease that needs to be treated with the utmost respect. So when you hear about people being allowed to fly back in without, from Spain, example today, without having to go into quarantine, it's just sending out a signal that everything's getting back to normal and people are beginning to maybe not be so disciplined as they think they should be. And it worries me because I know some doctors have spoken about this particular COVID virus, and it is nasty, absolutely nasty. And you don't have to stand next to somebody that's coughed in your face to catch it. The stuff hovers about in the air. So the best example I was told is if you've ever walked into an empty room and you smell perfume, then this is the same as COVID. The fact you can't smell it, it hangs about in suspension, and it can be picked up even though you can guarantee that you hadn't met anybody. So we still need to remain vigilant, and I fully suspect there's going to be a reoccurrence in the winter.
Worry you the thought that more and more businesses are going to be reopening in the coming weeks and months without maybe taking the right precautions?
It's terrifying, Kenny, absolutely terrifying. The last couple of weeks has been a bit of a roller coaster because I've been trying to work out whether my holistic business goes back to work, or which is not, but online business has been ticking over, and I have put in everything that I know possible. I've even bought my own, and everybody keeps slagging me off saying I've bought a fancy kettle, but I've even bought my own sanitation box so I can put equipment in that. And if this turns out to be COVID, I've done everything possible. Even when we're out and about, we wear facial coverings. We've got hand sanitizer. We very careful. So it just goes to show you, and then when there's businesses out there who seem to be very complacent, and you see it on social media and businesses getting ready to open up, businesses that are following the English guidelines instead of the Scottish guidelines, because the Scottish guidelines they've decided are too strict for them, which is really, really concerning because this virus takes no prisoners. And it's not worth the risk at all. And it's just, I'm at the stage where I'm thinking for my business, I'm carrying the online stuff is fine, but the more kind of holistic side, which is more personal, I'm just quite willing just to wait. If it takes October, September, November, December, then I'll wait. I'm just not willing to take the risk, and I understand it's people's incomes and people's bills, but as Ken says, the virus needs to be respected, and people need to respect it, and take all the precaution. It's not just one or two people taking precautions. Everybody's got to take the precautions.
We'll discuss that a little bit more with one of our later stories, but we move on just now. And the SNP has called on Boris Johnson to drop his extreme Brexit plans which threaten jobs and the NHS. The party's deputy leader, Keith Brown, MSP, said the Prime Minister must explain to people in Scotland today why he ordered his Tory MPs to block an amendment this week to the trade bill, which would specifically ensure that our NHS could not be carved up in any post-Brexit trade deal. Keith Brown said, "The only reason Boris Johnson is coming here is because he is in full-blown panic mode amidst rising support for independence. It's beyond belief that at a time when the economy is being hit hard by coronavirus, he's preparing to inflict further job losses by walking out of talks with the EU in less than 6 months, even if no trade deal has been agreed." Just this week, Boris Johnson's Scottish Tories queued up to block an attempt to protect our NHS from a post-Brexit trade deal with Donald Trump. Just like his notorious Brexit referendum pledge for £350 million a week for the NHS, Johnson has shown that his promises are not worth the paper they're written on. It's never been clearer that decisions about Scotland should be taken by the people who live here, not an out-of-touch Tory Westminster government. And Ken, this is a story we've been talking about for a long time, but this is just one more warning sign, I think, with the trade bill. The Brexit deal that Boris Johnson wants is not anything like what we were promised during the referendum.
You're asking me. Well, yeah, I mean, you're talking to Boris Johnson, so for a fact, the guy doesn't care what Scotland thinks. He probably doesn't even read the messages that are being sent to him. He does what he likes, and it's been proven that the establishment of the BBC, the main news companies, are backing him up. So, frankly, you could have 50,000 megaphones there. The guy doesn't care. We are insignificant, and that's just the way it's going to be until we decide to get our act together and start demanding for serious rather than begging for to be heard.
And a related story, the UK government will fail to sign a post-Brexit trade deal with the EU with only a few days left before Prime Minister Boris Johnson's July deadline, according to The Telegraph. The UK government's assumption is that there will not be a deal, though it remains possible that a basic agreement could be reached if the EU gives ground in the autumn, the newspaper said, citing government sources. The Tory government is expecting to trade with Europe on World Trade Organisation terms when the transition period ends, the report added. The UK formally left the EU on January 31st, and the relationship is now governed by the transition arrangement that keeps previous rules in place while new terms are negotiated. Negotiators remain deadlocked on fishing rights, the deal's governance, the European Court of Justice's role, and level playing field guarantees. In seeking trade deals with other countries, the Conservative government insists it will not maintain EU standards. A spokesman for Boris Johnson said the UK will continue to engage constructively with the EU on a future relationship, but that London is not willing to give up its rights as an independent state. Sam, it's really kind of trying to square a circle here, isn't it? The UK says it wants to have a deal with the EU, but it's not willing to do any of the things that are required to get a deal with the EU. Is this just Boris Johnson speaking out of both sides of his mouth?
Well, that's one way of putting it, isn't it, Kenny? The thing is, excuse me, with Boris Johnson, he does what he wants, and Ken's right, he's not interested in what us Scots think. He's very much does what he wants. And the thing is with the UK, they've still got this thing where they seem to think that they are more powerful and more significant in the world than what they actually are. They don't realise that they're no longer significant and they're no longer almighty and powerful. And they think that they basically should be able to call the shots. And this is what they're trying to do, and with the European Union, quite rightly so, is not allowing them to do so, because they represent other nations. It's just that the UK is trying to use bully boy tactics, which they have always done, and unfortunately, the current UK government represents everything of a previous era of the British Empire, if I may use that phrase, where they thought they did run the shots, and they seem to think that they're still. It's a shame. It's quite sad, really, because at the end of the day, these people are stuck in the dark ages. They haven't moved on to modern times. But yeah, I think it's now definitely now time that we stop begging and asking for permission for things. We need to start behaving as an independent country and actually start just doing so.
You mentioned earlier, Sam, the state of people's employment prospects. The SNP's Westminster Deputy Leader has challenged the Prime Minister to extend the furlough scheme into 2021, echoing industry warnings of a jobs bloodbath when the support scheme is prematurely cut back in under 2 weeks' time. With the Treasury set to push ahead with its first phase of cutting back support on August the 1st and then ending it entirely on the 31st of October, Make UK, the manufacturers' organisation, said an extension of the job retention scheme was vital to prevent a jobs bloodbath and to protect key sectors. The industry body warned that without an extension to support schemes, the manufacturing sector could witness job losses on a scale not seen since the 1980s, with research revealing that the number of manufacturing companies planning to make redundancies in the next 6 months has risen to 53%. Ken, we're looking at a situation now where on August the 1st, the furlough scheme drops from providing 80% of salaries to 60%. And we're naturally in that situation, I think, going to see workers pressuring businesses to get back to normal sooner than might be ideal. Do you think that's the goal of the UK government?
Who knows? I mean, frankly, because Scotland is coloured yellow, there is no raison d'etre for the Tories to do anything in Scotland. They can make life difficult for us or difficult for the SNP government, which is probably, a bit of schadenfreude from their point of view is, we don't need you. You don't cause any threats. The fact that if the public realise that they have the power as opposed to an SNP government, and that might be difficult. But all I would see is that support of any Tory MPs in Scotland, they'll get some token gestures, but everybody else can just swing. As I said, we have no influence. There's absolutely no influence for Scotland to ask or demand anything from the UK because there's no leverage we have. We've none whatsoever. We don't control the media. We don't control the parliament down south. We control the parliament here, but it's definitely under threat. I mean, I'm sure that's gone through the minds and the private meetings in Westminster. So yeah, they can do as much damage as they like to Scotland because it's no disadvantage to Tories in Westminster to do something different.
You mentioned your own business. Obviously, the job retention scheme itself doesn't affect you, but this reduction in support that's coming starting in August, all of the job retention scheme ending in October, we're seeing manufacturers saying this just isn't good enough. We can't get back to work normally that quickly. How concerned are you at this either leading to unsafe work practices or alternatively businesses making redundancies that they didn't really need to make if the government made different choices?
It's terrifying, but as Ken said previously, we're insignificant. The problem is it's as if they're deliberately pushing people back to work earlier than we need to be. The problem is they're talking about regional lockdowns. With regional lockdowns, that means businesses in the areas need to be able to close. And if there's no furlough scheme or anything, how do these businesses keep on paying their staff? I'm in a position where I'm self-employed and I don't employ staff. But I do know friends that do, and they are absolutely struggling even with the furlough scheme. Because a lot of them, what they were doing was obviously paying their staff the 100% wages that they would get, and the government pays the 80%, so they're paying that extra 20%, which is when the business is closed and not making any money, it's not a lot, but it is a lot over a period of time. And there is more and more talk of people not being able to sustain that. And there is But the problem is, what up here in Scotland, the Tories don't give a flying monkeys about what happens up here. And and it's going to affect us big style up here. They didn't care about what happened in the 80s with all the job losses and unemployment. They don't care now. They've got a bigger agenda. To them, this is the ideal opportunity to beat the Scots down. We were getting too mouthy, too cocky with independence and things, and this is a way of trying to beat us down. And keep us in our place. At the end of the day, it's up to, and Ken's right, the power lies with the people, and it's up to the people. Crikey, I sound as if I'm standing on my political soapbox here. To stand up and put pressure on the politicians and basically make independence happen, because at the moment this is just, it's going to be terrifying. There's going to be more businesses opening up that shouldn't be opening up, more businesses opening up with who haven't got safe working practices in place, because one, they don't quite fully understand what safe working practices are, or they can't afford, they don't have the finances to implement these things. So yeah, I don't know. The only way this is going to solve is we get off our backsides, and basically we need to get ourselves declared as independent and start taking control over our own taxes and our revenue as well.
Yeah, well, to Malta now, and Melvin Tuma, the taxi driver who admitted to being the middleman in the car bomb murder of Maltese journalist Daphne Caruana Galizia, is said to be in a stable condition after being found in his home last night with knife wounds to his neck, wrists and abdomen. Tuma, who was due to appear in court today to give evidence against businessman Jorgen Fennick, the alleged mastermind of the murder, had been under 24-hour police guard at his home. He had been given a pardon and immunity from prosecution in exchange for his testimony, but had said that he still feared for his life. Police said in a press conference earlier today that Tuma had been found alone at home with a knife in his hand after his lawyer had been unable to reach him by phone. He reportedly told police at the scene that the wounds were self-inflicted. Caruana Galizia, a tenacious campaigning journalist, was murdered in a car bomb attack in October 2017. Her family has always alleged that government figures were involved in the murder, and the corruption exposed by her case has already led to the downfall of Prime Minister Joseph Muscat and implicated his former Chief of Staff Keith Schembri and another minister, Conrad Mitzi. The three men Tuma claims to have recruited to carry out the attack have also been charged with murder. Ken, obviously we can't say with any certainty that what Tuma's claim that this was self-inflicted is untrue, but it's just one more layer of weirdness around this terrible case, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean, everybody seems to think that governments are all above board and transparent, and nothing's changed since the 13th century. There's a lot of Machiavellian plots going on, whether it be the Russians or the Americans, or even the stiletto British, as I like to call them. It's just the way it happens in the world, that people have got things to hide, and they will do what they can do to hide it, whether it be a scientist found under a tree with a butter knife, allegedly committing suicide, or people finding perfume bottles in the middle of a field. Strange things happen.
And Sam, this is we've talked a lot about this case in the past. Do you get the feeling that this is ever going to, that we're ever going to see any real justice around this case?
I don't think we are. It's just deplorable. Governments plotting against journalists that threaten to spill the beans and corruption. It's the age-old story, isn't it? And it's not going to go away. And but somebody stabbed themselves in the neck. Really, we're meant to believe that. Sorry, but I don't buy that one. But hey ho, he was part of it, and at the end of the day, you just, as far as I'm concerned, when some, whether it's journalists or anybody exposing the truth to be threatening them and, plotting their murder and then the bombing and everything, taking people's lives. It's just deplorable. But unfortunately, that age old, as Ken said, it's always happened with dodgy governments, and it's never going to change. People, doesn't matter what country you live in, it's um, you know, unfortunately, where there's power, there will be corruption, and that's the kind of age old question: how do you stop that? Because the two seem to go hand in hand.
We do, of course, send our solidarity to Daphne's family and to all the people who have been campaigning for justice on this case. And of course, to all journalists everywhere who are trying their best to root out corruption and face hostile governments. It's a dangerous business sometimes. And we do hope for the best for all of them. Moving on though. A newly built £100 million intensive care unit at an NHS hospital has been closed after it failed fire safety checks, leading to seriously ill patients being moved out. King's College Hospital in South London has had to shut the critical care unit after its own engineers and the London Fire Brigade identified problems that could potentially make it unsafe. The Trust has declared a critical incident over the closure, which has been prompted by fears that panels on the outside of the unit could make it easier for a fire to spread. The unit only opened in April and is the biggest and most advanced facility of its kind in the NHS. It has played a key part in helping King's manage an influx of seriously ill COVID-19 patients. It holds up to 56 patients and is understood to have had about 30 when the critical incident was declared this morning. They're being moved to other parts of the hospital, including a critical care ward that had been closed for refurbishment. So, Ken, this obviously NHS England having another problem to face this week, but the fact that it's panels on the outside of the building that potentially raise the fire risk in the wake of the Grenfell disaster seems almost unbelievable, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, there are quite strict planning regulations in this country that it just beggars belief that the specs, unless of course they've supplied something different to what's been specified on the bill of materials, but the specifications should have been clearly presented with the hazards associated with the building material and the ramifications of using such material. So it sounds as if there's money involved here, that it seems to be the reason why it's managed to get through, but it doesn't surprise me. Nothing surprises me anymore these days in this country. Nothing surprises me.
Good news, is it, when you're having to close a critical care unit in the middle of a pandemic because it's potentially going to go on fire? Because this isn't even the first fire-related problem the unit has had.
It's just unbelievable, isn't it? See, the thing is we should be surprised, and the sad fact is we're not surprised, and that's the dangerous thing. That just goes to show you the state of things, how they've became. I mean, the thing is, how did it pass building safety standards? How did it pass, anything? How did it pass anything? And the materials, and it's just, it just makes you wonder what's going on. What's going on with these people that whose jobs are responsible to make sure the materials are safe. There's something not right, and these people need to be investigated as to why they've turned around and um, passed this off as being, especially in a hospital. I mean, it's bad enough with Grenfell. That was just deplorable, and that was passed, and that should never have been. Um, but yeah, it's just deplorable. There's just no words. There's just really no words to this at all.
Well, we back at Westminster, the SNP's Shadow Women and Equality Secretary has urged the UK government to stand up for young people by increasing the statutory minimum wage and ending the age discrimination within it. Anne McLaughlin MP today urged Tory ministers to make it compulsory for employers using the newly announced Kick Start scheme to top up the insulting minimum wage in line with the real living wage, and ensure young people receive equal pay for equal work. UK government funding for the scheme will only cover 100% of the relevant national minimum wage for 25 hours a week. The call comes after new figures showed the number of 18 to 24-year-olds claiming out of work benefits in the UK has doubled in the last 3 months. The SNP has also called on the UK government to extend universal credit eligibility to students and uplift the universal credit allowance for under 25s in line with over 25s to better support young people during the coronavirus crisis. And Ken, have you ever been able to understand why being under 18 or even under 25 warrants a different rate of pay than being a wee bit older?
No, I don't. And it's exactly the same as banding within organisations and companies, that if you're a certain grade and you qualify for a certain level of pay depending on the role and responsibility. But if it's a general average salary, if you're 18 years old and you're unable to vote and you're able to defend your country and put your life at risk, you should get paid exactly the same rate as a 25-year-old or a 26-year-old. And that to me is it's simple. There should be no differential between the two age groups.
Anne McLaughlin mentioned when she was talking about this that her goddaughter, who's 17 years old, is technically a key worker during this pandemic, but is earning just £4.55 an hour. There really isn't a way to justify this, is there?
No.
There's not any way to justify this at all. The problem is this is, taking advantage of young people, and that's what they're doing. They're taking advantage of young people. But then again, does it surprise you? Because most of these big companies and that do take advantage are Tories or Tory donors. They're not, and it's about equality. And some of the young ones out there, they are literally modern day slaves where they're working long hours, doing things that are probably past they've not really got the experience in yet, and taking on roles and responsibilities for really pitiful pay. And yeah, something needs to happen about it.
The SNP has also renewed calls on the UK government to urgently change DWP rules to allow terminally ill people to get benefits fast-tracked, following a bid to change the law. Under current rules, benefits are only fast-tracked if a terminally ill person has a diagnosis of 6 months or less to live. A bill to change this law was brought before Parliament today, co-sponsored by campaigning SNP MP Drew Hendry. The All-Party Parliamentary Group on Terminal Illness, chaired by Drew Hendry, published a report on the plight of terminally ill people trying to access support just over a year ago. It found that those affected face financial hardship and crippling debt due to a policy implemented 3 decades ago. Mr Hendry has criticised the UK government for its deafening silence since the publication of the report. In Scotland, the SNP government has said it will ensure anyone diagnosed with a terminal illness will get fast access to disability benefits when they are introduced. And Sam, again, this is just the inhumanity of the way that benefits are done in the UK, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It makes no sense, does it? How they come about these rules. If you're terminally ill, but if you've got a diagnosis that takes you over 6 months, and then, at the end of the day, things can change so quickly. Just because a doctor turns around and says, we think you've got X amount of time to live, that can change. The doctor doesn't have a crystal ball, they don't know. And I must admit, when my mum was diagnosed with a terminal illness, the DWP in my local area were absolutely amazing. They took me through the whole they literally held my hand, and I know that doesn't happen, and I know that is probably very rare, but the staff were absolutely amazing. But right from when I phoned up through the call centre right to the staff in the office were just took my hand and took me through each step, and they done everything, and talked me through everything regarding my mum. But and as I say and I repeat, it doesn't happen. And the thing is when people are dealing with this and families are dealing with this, they don't need this on top. There's so many, they're going through so many emotions, they're going through so many different things, they're dealing with so many different organisations, banks, the lot. Um, the last thing they need is the DWP, and the red tape and the barriers that are actually put there. And we need to make that as sympathetic as possible and as easy as possible for people.
We move now to Belarus, and dismissed by the incumbent as too fragile to run Belarus because of their sex, 3 women have joined forces to try to unseat President Alexander Lukashenko, a man the United States once described as Europe's last dictator. Lukashenko, who has been in office for more than 25 years, has cracked down on rare but sustained protests against him ahead of a presidential election next month, jailing rivals and arresting dissenters. He faces his biggest challenge in years due to frustration over his hands-off handling of the coronavirus pandemic and grievances over the economy and human rights. With his male challengers either barred from running or in prison, 2 of their wives and a female campaign team member of another have united to try to beat him in the August 9th election. Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, whose husband Serhiy spent time in solitary confinement, has become the surprise leading challenger to Lukashenko, a 65-year-old former Soviet collective farm boss. Tikhanovskaya launched her candidacy after her husband, a popular blogger who campaigned against Lukashenko, was arrested in May on what she says were trumped-up charges. Lukashenko is expected to extend his grip on power despite the challenge. Western observers do not judge elections in the country to be free and fair. So Ken, do you have much expectation that these women can make a difference in Belarus?
I see no reason why not. I mean, why should they? They have the courage and the strength and the solidarity of their sisters and brothers. I'm sure they can affect change if they just stick at it.
The elections are not necessarily going to be fairly run, but these women do seem to be attracting a lot of attention. They've been described as being like a rock band as they've been moving around Belarus campaigning. Do you think that women are best placed, perhaps, to challenge this kind of very masculine, authoritarian government?
Oh, definitely, Kerry. The thing is, there's, try and keep down a strong, independent woman, and then put a few together, and by goodness, that's try and hold them down. Um, it's about time he was put in his place, and I hope everybody gets behind them and votes for them. I know the elections may not always seem to be but no, I think definitely. Try and keep a good, powerful woman down. Put a few together, and it becomes even more difficult.
We'll obviously keep an eye on that election when it happens at the start of next month. But our final story tonight, stone tools unearthed in a cave in central Mexico and other evidence from 42 far-flung archaeological sites indicate people arrived in North America, a milestone in human history, much earlier than previously expected, upwards of 30,000 years ago. Scientists said today that they had found 1,930 limestone tools, including small flakes and fine blades that may have been used for cutting meat, and small points that may have been used as spear tips, indicating human presence at the Chiquihite cave in a mountainous regions of Mexico's Zacatecas state. The tools spanned from 31,000 to 12,500 years old, said archaeologist Ciprian Ardelean of the Universidad Autónoma de Zacatecas in Mexico, lead author of one of 2 studies published in the journal Nature. The site appears to have been occupied periodically for millennia by nomadic hunter-gatherers. In the second study, evidence from 42 sites around North America and the location of a land bridge that connected Siberia to Alaska during the last ice age indicated human presence dating to at least a time called the last glacial maximum, when ice sheets blanketed much of the continent, about 26,000 to 19,000 years ago and immediately thereafter. The research also implicated humans in the extinction of many large Ice Age mammals, such as mammoths and camels. Our species first appeared about 300,000 years ago in Africa, later spreading worldwide. The new findings contradict the conventional view that the first people arrived in the Americas around 13,000 years ago, crossing the land bridge, and were associated with the Clovis culture, known for distinctive stone tools. The findings suggest low numbers of people entered the continent earlier than previously understood, some perhaps by boat along a Pacific coastal route rather than crossing the land bridge, and some died out without leaving descendants. So Ken, revolutionary news in archaeology that there were people in the Americas long before we thought there were. What does this mean to you?
Well, I've always known it because there's Sinclair stones found in North America from the Sinklers well before Christopher Columbus or any other individual that's taken as gospel were born. So it's not new. What I find difficult to accept is you can't prove somebody's statement that something happened 30,000 years ago with, in my view, any degree of accuracy, because it's just speculation, as is all prehistory is speculation, because you don't know if it's right and you don't know if it's wrong. So yeah, I believe that we ran a story once about Egyptian mummies being found with tobacco inside their stomach, and tobacco is a product of North America. So it seems to be that even then, in the times of the pharaohs, that there was trade coming from the American continent to Europe and the Middle East.
And Sam, I mean, it is always interesting to kind of dig into history and find out these things that we never knew before, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It kind of gives us answers to the present, doesn't it? But no, it is interesting. Because when you look back in history, I don't know if you've ever been to the Cranach Centre up in Perthshire. We took a wee wander up. I took a wee wander up with the wee one last year, and they found evidence of trade between the Scots way back then with Europe, and that was long before they were believed to be trading. So, and this is the thing when you start diving in, the preconceived ideas are always being disproved with modern technology, carbon dating and things. As technology evolves, we're always disproving what we believed was history. And one of the things that's a great one of mine, sorry, my apologies, my dog's decided to start barking, is the fact that, that there's been some evidence with the tribes in America, the Cherokee tribes and Scotland way back as well. So there's all this, and this is what people forget. We forget that humans are natural travellers. We love to travel, and we've always done it right through the ages. We like to travel. We are inquisitive. We like to go exploring, and we still do it. Which is great. It's all part of our kind of makeup, really.
Absolutely. Well, Sam, we will call it a day there. Let you go and get a rest and go and feed the dog if that's what he's after. That is the end of the show tonight. Again, we apologise for the slight delay we had at the start. We have truncated the show slightly, so we're not keeping you all night. But thank you very much to Ken and to Sam for joining us tonight. Sam, especially in the state she's in, as we say. Hopefully, Sam, that test comes back negative. But thank you as well at home for joining us. If you're able to support Broadcasting Scotland, we would very much appreciate it. It's the only way we can keep bringing you these shows. So if you can, do please go to broadcastingscotland.scot/register and sign up there as a supporter. Your £5 a month makes all the difference. in what we're able to do here at the channel. If you're not able to support us financially, we do understand, and we should let you know the shows will always be free to view online, but you can still help us by being our marketing team. Talk to people about why you support Broadcasting Scotland. We have, especially if you are, for example, over 75 and you're being told that you're no longer going to get your license fee paid for, then don't pay for a license fee. Send a few quid to us, watch the shows here, and hopefully we can fill in the gaps for your news at least. Follow us on Twitter at Broadcast Scot. Find us on Facebook, and you can share the programs from there as well. Let people know what we do, where we are, and why you support us. And finally, as I've said this before, but we're always looking for new people to get involved here at Broadcasting Scotland. It takes a lot of work to make these programs happen. We need journalists, we need people, techie people working behind the scenes, and we also need people that are willing to step in front of the camera as well. So do please get in touch with us if you've got any interest in getting involved in television news. It's something that we want to get more people involved in. We want to be able to have a really highly trained team that can manage this as we continue to grow the channel. So do please get in touch. But that is us for this evening. Gordon will be back tomorrow at 7. I'll be back on Friday with another special edition where we are going to be talking in a lot more depth about the Russian report that came out this week. But until then, do have a wonderful evening. Good night.